So, we mentioned earlier, here's the 4 options. By the way, as far as I'm concerned, if anybody wants these PowerPoints, you all can have them if you think they'd be helpful to you. But here's the 4 options. We've talked about these a lot now. Leaving the money in the plan, transferring it to a new employer plan, taking a taxable distribution, or rolling into an IRA. So what are the big broker-dealers? What are the wirehouses doing about this? Well, this is an educational piece, for example, put out by UBS, where they walk people through the advantages and disadvantages. So that they have a little chart at the beginning where they walk through the options, and then they have a document where they walk through, they call it considerations, the different things that an investor might want to consider in making a rollover decision. So right now, because of the uncertainty in this area, I would say the single most common response by broker-dealers is education. We're going to take the educational approach. We're going to try to get our advisors to not make recommendations, realizing that's pretty hard to control from 3,000 miles away. But the idea being, let's go the education approach until all this gets sorted out. As a part of that, I think the education approach would include education on the alternatives, pros and cons, like that UBS piece I just showed you. We're working with a number of broker-dealers to create their materials. This is a document called What to Do with Your 401k Account that we've prepared for one broker-dealer. And it walks through the 4 options and then the major advantages and disadvantages of each. Also, we recommend, as I've already told you, an acknowledgement that you include in your account opening materials or elsewhere that you get the participant to acknowledge. This acknowledgement will vary a little bit depending on whether you're acting as an RIA fiduciary or whether you're acting as a registered representative of a broker-dealer, non-fiduciary. But the idea being that the participant acknowledge that they received the information, acknowledge that they understood the options, and made a decision.
Is there like a time limit on these disclosures? In other words, if I do an educational event for my participants that talks about 4 different options, what to do with your 401k, et cetera, right? And 3 years later, someone from the company is going to retire, or they're going to a different company. Do I need to, am I still covered, or do I need to make that disclosure again?
Well, remember the education only applies if they don't come to you and say, hey, I'm going to take my money out, I want you to handle it. So if they just come to you and say, I'm going to take my money out, then you don't have to worry about it in any event. But if they come to you and say, what should I do? Well, now you're faced, you can't make a recommendation, because if you do, notwithstanding the fact that you previously did education, you're now under the supervisory rules for a recommender. So you really sort of need to go back through that again. And the key to the education is that you talk to them about what matters to them. For example, this is the form that we prepared for a broker-dealer. Your plan may offer investment choices that are less expensive than those available to you outside of the plan. Take that into account. The minimum required distributions can be delayed longer in a plan than in an IRA. So, and then it has some disadvantages. And then under advantages of rolling over to an IRA, an advisor for a rollover IRA may be able to give you personalized advice about investing in retirement planning. Does that matter to you a lot? A little? Not at all? So what you're trying to do, what I would do is take this. In a perfect world, I'd develop a decision tree out of it, like 5 or 6 questions where you start off with 1 and 2, and then you break it down and help guide them through to a decision. In a less perfect world, but still I think effective, would be I'd go through and highlight certain ones of these and say, these are the ones I think that most people find to be the most important. Let's talk about those and what matters to you. So, yeah, I think in 3 years, it's probably worn off. Most education wears off me in 2 weeks, So Yeah, but I do think you can have some tools where you're not just, don't think of education in this context as being a lecture, like what I'm doing now. I mean, it's really intended to be more actionable. And I think the services thing, I think you've got to talk about the fees of the investment. I think you've got to get rid of the conflict of interest issue involving you, your compensation and the plan, or even if you don't have anything to do with that plan, I'm going to make money off the IRA. I could make more than the advisor, I'll make more recommending you go to an IRA than I will if you stay on the plan. I mean, however you want to deal with that, but getting rid of that conflict of interest issue, because that's surely one of the things that the DOL, the SEC, and FINRA would look at. Disclosing information about the differences in investment expense ratios, that's sure to get looked at. Okay, so we got the really bad things off the table. Now let's talk about the good things. Let's talk about the additional services that I can provide, retirement planning, withdrawal planning, investing in a kind of a portfolio that's right while you're in retirement rather than while you're accumulating. Concluding all of your assets in a holistic view and putting assets that should be tax sheltered in the IRA and those that don't need to be as much in your personal account. Helping you with minimum required distributions. I mean, there's just so many ways. Giving personalized advice is a bigger category, but I think that word personalized appeals a lot to people. There's just so many ways that you can do, you can point out what you add positively that are, in fact, the things I think that people want. That I have such a high degree of confidence that if a participant understands that they'll want to go with you. And then the rest of this is just a tool. It's just a tool to get there and something to have for risk management in the file that you keep on that participant. So, but that's how I would use this. I mean, frankly, I wish I could say everybody was going to read, what is it, 5 pages typewritten? Wow, I underestimated. I should have charged by the page. 6 pages typewritten. I mean, how many people are really going to sit down and studiously read 6 pages? So I think you're going to have to, in your own mind, talk to them about what matters to them a little bit. Then pick out the ones on here and walk them through it. And then give it to them and say, here's a copy, read it, make sure you understand it. If there's anything that bothers you, let me know. Just give me a call. I'm always there for you. So. Okay, so education on the alternatives, pros and cons. As I said, you're going to give them the whole document. They can go read that on their own and give you a call later. What you're going to do is walk them through the ones that either they've suggested to you would be the most important or that you feel are the most important, based on your experience with other participants. A checklist for the suitability discussion, that's really no more than this form shortened and developed into a checklist. That was, I said in a perfect world, if you could get it down to a more limited number that you'd really focus on, you could do that by creating a checklist or just highlighting the ones on here that you find are the most important. Disclosure about fees and expenses for the investments, because the DOL, the SEC, and FINRA are going to look at that. About your compensation, same reason. Those are the main areas that what you do is going to be scrutinized. Did you have a real discussion with the participants about that? That's that conflict of interest quote I started off with. Key liquidity events, remember that? That's what that was all about. The government is just screaming at you that that's what they're interested in. And therefore, it's in your interest to show that you properly educated participants on those issues. And then a participant acknowledgement. I'm a lawyer. I like stuff in writing. I like stuff that's signed. I realize the protection that it gives you for them to say, yeah, sure, my advisor talked to me about all this. They talked to me about this document called What to Do with Your 401k Account and gave me a copy. I acknowledge that my advisor discussed that with me and provided me with a copy. That's what I mean by the acknowledgement. I have it here as a standalone document. It can be done this way, or it can be built into a service agreement or an account opening form. Do it some way that works. Just make it work. Yeah.
What if they come to you already with the decision that they already made up their mind that they want to do the rollover, and you go back and you still do education? Do you put yourself in the fiduciary status?
No, you don't need to. I mean, you may do that as a service, but if they say they've already made the decision, you don't need to. Actually, from a legal perspective, you then shift to a different area of suitability, which that FINRA notice goes into also, the regulatory notice, they list like 8 or 10 things that should be taken into account in advising a participant about how to invest inside an IRA. So, but the minute that you can chop off that connection with the distribution decision, you're way ahead of the game. You don't have to worry about recommendations. You don't have to worry about education. If you want to provide that as a service, fine. And nothing wrong. I mean, it's wonderful to do that. But actually your legal focus, rather than any social or moral focus you may feel, your legal focus shifts over to how do I invest them properly inside an IRA. That's where I was saying earlier, by the way, I think you need to have a good investment methodology for that. I mean, I just see somewhere we're going to have another 2001 or 2008, somewhere 75 and 80-year-old people are going to lose 20, 30, 40% of their account balance, and the lawsuits are just going to fly. I mean, that's coming at us as sure as there's a train at the other end of that tunnel.
Would a best practice combine both of them into one service model? Like this, we're going to educate you, and this is our methodology. You decide to do an IRA.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I think different people are going to take different approaches to that, and I can't say anyone's better or worse than the other, but it's certainly not a bad thing to do. So, so anyway, those are the materials and the disclosures that I'd really like to see all have. Let me a few more steps. I strongly recommend that you do not recommend to participants they take in-service distributions. We see some of that going on out there. I think that is one of the areas most likely to be heavily scrutinized. While that participant is still an employee of the company, they're still participating in the plan, they're still working there, to tell them to take the money out of the plan and put it into an IRA, that IRA better have lower expenses than that plan, or this has just got the potential for explosion, because there may not be a good enough reason at that point. Yeah?
You're focusing a lot on lower expenses in the IRA,
Yeah.
and if you look at a client buying a variable annuity, which perhaps the only reason you wouldn't qualify plan is for the guaranteed income benefits, which are significantly more expensive than a managed account or mutual fund portfolio.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? I mean, is the guarantee you're buying that they're getting, and the interest in getting that, is that negate the fee issue?
It could. I mean, the difficulty there for me to evaluate that is that the plan sponsor, if there were certain providers, can put a GMWB in the plan for 60 to 100 basis points additional cost. Maybe an all-in cost, including expense ratio of the investment, of 160, 170 basis points max. And then what I see in terms of the variable annuities, sometimes 350, 400 basis points. I just wonder how much are they going to have to earn to offset that. That's what I worry about. I know, I mean, it will be heavily scrutinized. Now, how do you overcome that? Well, I'd say do a couple of things. One, make sure all of your compensation is laid out cold on the table, front end, trailing, everything, because that takes away the argument that you pulled the wool over the person's eyes. Make sure all the expenses are laid out, and of course make it clear to them that you're not double counting, that that's not your compensation on top of the expenses, and then point out the benefit of the GMWB or whatever the guarantee is inside the variable annuity. But the government is focusing on costs. It's not. The reason I'm doing it is because all the government literature does it. That's why I'm talking so much about that today. I'm a great believer in value, and the problem with the cost discussion is it's all cost if it's not value. And so for somebody that had a real strong worry, I mean, they were really, really, truly worried about how their money's going to last, like that title that I had at the beginning, the Bank of America Merrill Lynch survey. Yeah, I think that can make some sense. But watch, I'll just tell you, it's going to get scrutinized. It just is. But in-service distributions are an area that's going to get looked at very closely. None of these are inherently wrong. Don't get me wrong on that. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying this is where the government's really going to look at it. So you better have a strong case to be able to get away without without them taking an adverse position. The Government Accountability Office felt that most of the materials that our participants are given by providers, by plan sponsors and others, pretty much by everybody, is biased in terms of distributions and rollovers to IRAs. It's almost like woven into the fabric of our world now, the retirement world, is you will retire, you will take a distribution, and you will roll it over to an IRA. And that nobody's ever really challenged whether that's the right thinking or not. And now what they're doing is challenging that. Do I think it's going to fundamentally change the way business is done? No. Do I think that very large plans may end up keeping the money and distributing to participants who want to do it that way? Yes. Because in very large plans, I worked on one plan that was like 7 or 8 billion, a huge plan. I forget what their expense ratios were. It was like 20 basis points for actively managed funds. It was just ridiculous. But those aren't available to us generally. That was a very unique situation. Or they also had like another $8 billion defined benefit plan, and they were using the same managers for both. Well, you can imagine what the negotiating leverage is in negotiating with the active managers. No mutual funds, separately managed accounts. Recommendations that result in high or hidden costs or compensation to the advisor. I think you all have gotten the point that I'm trying to make, that a hidden cost, something that isn't disclosed, just makes you look so bad. It's a changed world, and conflicts of interest and undisclosed costs or fees are, really, truly, clearly disclosed, as becoming a big issue. So you have to be careful about that. Recommendations that have conflicts of interest that aren't disclosed, particularly if they aren't disclosed. I make a lot more money if you do it this way than I do if you do it that way. Even if doing it this way is the better thing for the investor, disclose the compensation difference. Get rid of that. Just get it off the table as an issue. You find, I think, up front that you're in a relationship of trust, and you're in the romance period, the honeymoon period. You can lay it all out there, and people really want to work with you. So much better for down the line, because if something falls apart, then down the line, it's the loss of money. They go hire an attorney. The investor goes hire an attorney, and then the attorney starts looking for a legal reason. It's not the legal reason that causes you to get sued, it's the loss of money. And then the attorney looks for a legal reason. So that's why having full disclosure up front is such a beneficial thing. Should we wrap this up, or there's a, okay. I took questions along the way rather than at the end, so I think I've pretty well covered everything. If there are any remaining questions, one or two, and then we'll wrap.
I just wonder, it's a little bit off topic, but one of the subjects that was highlighted is an area to be covered in contrasting 401k plan versus an IRA was legal protection against creditor claims. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that subject, and how, if you were meeting with a California client, because I gather there are differences across states, what you would have to say about that. The other one I didn't see on the list.
I've got a short memory. Let me answer the first one. I'll forget. They're both the same in bankruptcy. A rollover IRA and a planned benefit are both protected in bankruptcy. So it's not bankruptcy, it's a lawsuit. So if somebody has if they're getting sued, and the question is, can you attach and seize the money for a judgment if the person doesn't declare bankruptcy? Bankruptcy, you're protected either way. In California,
even if the bankruptcy is triggered by a legal claim.
In California, you can't sue you and collect from your plan. Matter of fact, that's protected federally. But in California, if I sue you and collect from your IRA, you're entitled to protect the reasonable needs, your reasonable needs. If you're 85 years old, maybe that protects the whole IRA. If you're an orthopedic surgeon and you're 50, maybe the court says, hey, you can replace it all. So it's a facts and circumstances test. So in California, it really depends on the investor. It depends on who you're working with. If they're, certainly for a retired person, unless they're really, really rich, there's a pretty good argument they need what's in their IRA. The husband and the wife, age 70, maybe they're going to live another 20, 25 years. very hard to say. I mean, I can't imagine an IRA so big, short of Governor Romney's IRA. Your other question?
Well, the other, I didn't see up there something which has come up in conversations with clients having to do with loans that are available if the money is kept in a 401k versus coming over to an IRA.
Yeah, I can't remember now. I know it's an R form, the one I've created. But yeah, if you take a loan out of an IRA, that's a taxable distribution. Obviously, you can take participant loans from plans. On the other hand, if you have a participant loan in a plan and you decide to retire that's not fully paid, you really have to look at the plan document. You sort of have to tell the participant, go look. Some will let you continue to make payments. Others will declare it in default right after you terminate. You have to pay it off immediately. So that's a tough situation. And there's no, you can't have a prepackaged answer. You just have to tell the participant, go talk to the benefits people, look at your summary plan description, see, figure out what's available to you there. But you cannot roll a promissory note over into an IRA. It's immediately taxed. So, are we all done?
One quick question. So in smaller plans, there's always there's a lot of pressure to get terminated participants out because they're paying extra fees, right? So is there any guidelines coming along in terms of what a plan sponsor can charge these folks? Because at the end of the day, sometimes they move, you can't find them. It's a real pain in the ass to have to, go after these small accounts versus just roll. Some of the plans allow you, they have an automatic IRA thing, and the small money goes out. But some of them you can't get out. So where's the balance for the plan sponsor to be able to charge them? Is there any conversation about that?
Yes and no. There's some very limited rules on that aren't particularly helpful. I mean, there are some rules, but they're not helpful in the typical case. So I wouldn't even think about them. Beyond that, no. I think what will happen in the future is that if these rules keep continuing to grow and this area becomes more and more regulated, I think almost every plan will put in a $5,000 forced distribution provision, because there's no real desire, particularly on the part of small plan sponsors, to keep the money in the plan for the participants that aren't there anymore. That's why I kept referring to big plan sponsors as being interested in doing it, which I think is true. They've got HR people running the show, different mindset. Where you have an entrepreneur or a professional firm, I think they want to do things for their employees, but they don't have much interest in doing things for people who are gone. So I do think that small plans will probably not embrace, many of them at least. Maybe family-owned corporations would be different because it's a different dynamic. But I think that the $5,000 figure would be almost universal, and that there will be forced distributions up to that. Beyond that, it's hard to get money out of a plan, and the rules don't let you just charge them because the money's there. There are a couple scenarios, but they're not what you or I would ordinarily run into. So, okay, guys, thank you very much.